All right, we have an action-packed night of cooking, so we are going to almost get right on into it. The very, very, very first thing that I'm going to do, because I have an hour to show you how to make the greatest soup you've ever had in your life. So I'm going to get right started and pop some of my bacon fat into my pan, because I got to get these veggies sauteing, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm doing what I'm doing. Kevin, do you want to start on the carrots? So I'm going to put some bacon fat into this gigantic Dutch oven here. I'm using bacon fat because I like the flavor of it. I think it adds a really, really great note. And so while Kevin is doing this, because this is going to take a little bit of time, you're probably wondering what it is that he's doing. And so, can I lift this up for 1 second? This is a mandolin. This is my way of cutting vegetables so that they can all be uniform. And so our chicken soup today is going to have carrots, celery, onion, some peas, some chicken thighs is what we're going to be using. But to make sure that all of our veggies are the same thickness, we're going to run them all through the mandolin versus hand chopping. I highly recommend you look into getting one of these tools. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing today. We are going to be making this chicken noodle soup from scratch. And so what does scratch mean? Scratch means I'm going to show you how you're making your own broth. I'm going to show you how to leverage some of your fresh veggies that you have used. Your fresh herbs that you might have stored in your gardens from the summer. So I'm going to switch this around. You can see my pan is smoking hot. And the reason my pan is smoking hot is because I'm going to hit a nice little caramelization on these veggies that we're running through the mandolin. And so the reason that you see all of these bowls and things here is because we are going through a process where we're going to save all of our veggie scraps. So every piece that Kevin's not using is going into this bowl. And so we're leveraging every bit of the scraps, because at the end of this, we are going to be saving all these scraps into a baggie to make stock so that we are ready to make soup the next time that we do it. And so I'm going to start adding in the carrots into my pan while Kevin's making some of these guys up. You don't have to do all of them if you feel like you have enough. So all of these carrots are now, a nice little thin size. It's pretty hard for you to see on here, but it's like a nice little 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. How's that feel?
I think that's good.
Yeah? Nice. So my first step in my chicken noodle soup is I will start caramelizing the carrots. And what I'm going for is a nice brown color all throughout my carrots. I'm putting them into my pan first. Give them a little swizzle with my bacon. I'm putting them into my pan first because the carrots take the longest to get softened up. So I have my heat on kind of high, only because I know I'm going to be sitting here and I'm going to be staring at it. So I'm probably at what I would consider a medium heat. And the carrots are sizzling away really beautifully. And you can see the bacon grease. And so because I'm watching them, I'm going to just kind of leave them be for a minute to get a little bit of color on them. I'm going to take a little pinch of salt now. Kevin, I'm going to have you hold on 1 second because I want you to show how you're cutting this onion. So I'm doing a little pinch of salt in here now. And these are just going to be percolating away until they're the nice golden color. In the meantime, I want to prepare the rest of the veggies that are going to be caramelizing in the next step. So the next veggies that'll go in is the onion, and I'll be caramelizing those in with the carrot so that everybody continues to get nice and good color. But what I want to show you is how Kevin's actually going to be cutting this onion, because this is a really life-saving technique when you have a meal like this that is using an onion or a basketball in this case. The thing is huge. So he's going to run you through how to cut an onion really effectively and quickly, honestly. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, so I started off, I just cut the top of the onion off so it's got a flat surface on it to get it nice and steady so you don't cut yourself. And then right through the root of it, cut it straight in half. And then once it's in half, it's easy to get that outside layer off.
And remember, we're saving everything. Yep, we're saving everything in our scrap hole.
This is a giant onion.
We just needed a little onion.
Just a little bit?
Like just a little onion.
We may not use all of it.
It's aggressive.
So once you've got your half, and I leave the root on there for a reason, it's just to hold the onion together while you're slicing it, so it's just a little quicker, a little more efficient. So once you've got that cut, you want to put it on the root end and then start slicing down, but not all the way through. And you're just going to cut that into, well, whatever size slices is, you're going to do your dice at. So you cut almost all the way through, not quite.
And you're saying your dice to be about a half an inch is what I can see that you guys might not be able to see.
Oh.
He's setting it to be a dice of a little less than a half an inch.
And then once you've got your slices coming in this way, you just do a bunch of slices down. And again, you don't go all the way through. You want to leave about half an inch at the top. So then you've got that set, and then you just cross, and you can see just it's all nice and evenly chopped pretty quickly.
And so the key to why you would cut your onion this way and why you would mandolin your veggies is it's really all about keeping things in a consistent shape and a consistent size, because it means that at the end of the day, you won't have, when you're working on your soup, you're not going to have chunks that are raw and then chunks that are really overcooked. So this will keep it so that your consistency of all of the veggies are a really nice cooked through. They all look the same. And it actually makes for a really beautiful soup too, when everything's kind of uniform with each other. And so we won't need all of this onion that he's cutting, but we will actually use quite a bit of it. The ingredients that I'm using in this soup: carrots, the celery, onion, chicken thighs, we have some peas. And so I like to caramelize the veggies and get them really nice and flavorful and browned. When all of my veggies are done, I set them aside and take them right out of the pan, and I set them aside in another bowl while I then work on the chicken that I'm going to be using and how I want to cut it up and how I want to cook it. And the reason that I don't keep my veggies or the reason I'm not chucking everything into a pan all at the same exact time is because I want to preserve those flavors of everything and not just have a soup that tastes exactly like everything else, where all of the ingredients might taste like the same thing. So my carrots are getting a nice little caramel color. So I'm going to add in my onion. I always add a little more onion, a little more aggressively than you think you would need. And the reason I do that is because the onion really cooks down, like to almost nothing. And I'm sure you're used to seeing that when you're making your own, things with onions. They tend to disappear a little. And so this is the state that we are in right now. We have a little bit of caramelized color on the carrots, and we have the onions just now picking up some of that color. It's going to be a really nice looking soup. So I haven't changed the setting on the mandolin. So Kevin is doing the celery and the same setting that he had done with the carrots. The way that I like my soup, I like my carrots to be mostly cooked through. I like the onions to be translucent, and I like the celery to be just a little bit translucent as well. But the celery seems to take a little less time to soften up and to caramelize than the rest of the veggies do. So you'll notice that I'll be putting that celery in much closer to the end. Kev, I'm going to remove these veggies for you so that we can, so you can use this for your celery. And again, I'm still on medium heat. I'm a little over medium heat because I'm kind of accelerating this process because we are making a beautiful soup for you guys. I would say your ideal chicken soup is probably going to only take you about like maybe an hour and 15 minutes. But because I've done this a million times, and especially in the last 2 years, I've done this a million times, I'm feeling comfortable cooking this on a little bit of a higher heat. And I'm standing right here staring at it. But if you are doing this in the comfort of your own home while you're doing other things, you most likely would want to cook this so high because it could turn to nice and brown and then go black really fast. And then you're stuck with a very burned soup. So at this point, we just have the bacon fat. We have our discs of carrots and we have our chopped onion. We have a tiny bit of salt that I put in there in the beginning with the carrots. I don't have any of my herbs entered into the mix yet. That will come in at a later stage. So right now we are just focusing on caramelizing these vegetables. So the next step, while we're working on vegetables, the next step that we're going to go into is we are using chicken thighs. Do you want to pull your container forward? We are using chicken thighs as our protein for our chicken soup. You can use whatever you would like. I tend to really like the chicken thighs, the darker meat, because I just think it adds a richness to a chicken noodle soup, or a chicken soup, I should say. That's just really unparalleled. The darker meat, I think, is great. You love it too.
Yeah. It's a lot more forgiving too than the chicken white meat.
It is a lot more forgiving. So in this case, we bought chicken thighs, skin on, bone in. There was a great sale going, and although we don't want the bones in there for our soup, we're actually going to save the bones and save the skin to be able to make a stock to use for our soups moving forward. So Kevin's going to show you how he takes the chicken thighs, how he debones them, and how we save up the skin. And he's going to go through this tutorial a few times. We have, I think, about 6 of them. They're giant.
Good enough, yeah.
So he's going to go through this a couple of times with you so that you can see it and get familiar. I'll just be over here sauteing my little buns off.
So yeah, as far as getting the skin off them, that's really easy. You kind of just grab onto it. You just pull that right off. You have a little bowl for that.
The first question you're probably asking while he's taking the skin off is, why am I keeping the skin in the first place? And the skin's going to play a neat little part, a tiny little trick later on in the soup process. So I'm having him set it aside so that I can more easily grab it while he continues to process the meat.
So once you've got the the skin coming off, you're going to trim a little bit of the excess fat off the side. You just don't need that much flavor in the soup there.
And so Kevin has a scrap. You're going to use that other bowl right there in front of you. So Kevin has a scrap bowl, very similar to what we did for the veggies. So when you see him putting something off to the side, he's just putting the scraps in. The meat fat scraps.
So then you take it on the skin side of your hand, the bone towards the top, and the joint side with the cartilage kind of on the inside. And I like to take a little deboning knife, and I cut an X right over the bone. So once you've got that X carved, you can kind of just fillet down the side of the bone a little bit, so you can kind of start to expose it. And you can see now it's starting to kind of poke out a little. I pinch that. And then you take the deboning knife and cut just under it on one side.
Don't go towards you.
Don't go towards you. Then it just kind of peels right down. And then you just cut around that joint, making sure you get all the cartilage. And then you've got a nice bone for making stock. And then you've got a nice boneless chicken though. So it's pretty quick, pretty easy.
So because we're going to be using these bones to make stock, it is completely okay if you are, while you're getting good at your deboning, it's completely okay if you have meat still on that bone, because you're going to use that to make your chicken stock. This soup, and the intention behind this soup, is to have nothing be wasted. We're going to use every single thing that you see here. Kev, while you're working through that and continuing to tutorial, I'm going to put in our celery. But first I want to show you what our mixture of caramelization looks like. And so it's a little hard to tell. I apologize for the awkwardness, but you can see how it's a nice little golden caramelized onion, and the carrots still have their color on them too. So now I'm going to add in my celery. I'm also going to add in a tiny bit more grease. Okay, Ken.
Yeah, as you can see, we're getting right through it. Take your time, and then once you get used to it, and you've done a couple, you can get pretty efficient at it. When you cut it off though on that joint side, it is right kind of at the bottom. You just want to kind of peel it after, just make sure you got all that cartilage out of there. Not that it'd be bad for you if you ate a piece, but the texture just kind of throw you off a little bit. And again, leaving a little bit of meat on the bone there will just make for a better stock. So you can be a little bit on the safe side, trimming around that joint.
Especially while you're practicing, because it took us quite some time to get to this place where we could go through really quickly and debone the meat. So on your next one, run through the whole thing again so we can really try to show. I know it's a little difficult sometimes because you can't see as much.
Yeah. So again, we're just going to grab that flap of skin. That just peels right off. We're going to trim a little bit of that excess fat off the side. Hold it with the joint side of the chicken thigh towards yourself and the skin side in the palm of your hand. Cut an X over the top of the bone. And then just a little bit lightly cut down the side of the bone. And then I pitch that, cut underneath it. And you can kind of just scrape down the side of it. And then cut around that bottom joint. And then you've got just your boneless, skinless chicken thigh there after that. And if you're going to do roasted chicken also, something that you can't buy, that we do enjoy for dinner, is a boneless skin-on chicken thighs. You can't buy those. So you would just debone it and then kind of fold it back up like a chicken thigh and bake that in the oven at 350 for like an hour, and you're going to get really crispy skin and a boneless thigh, so it's real easy to eat. So if I were doing that, like this one, I just kind of trim the extra fat and skin off of it, just so the skin matches the size of the chicken thigh. Then again, I would take that bone out by carving an X over it, a little bit down each side.
This is one of our favorite things.
Yeah, this is one of our favorite dinners. It's why we started deboning chicken thighs to begin with, was to be able to get these really tasty skin on but boneless chicken thighs.
Plus, if you learn to do this and you do this moving forward, you'll realize how popular you are with your friends, because no one gets a skin on boneless chicken thigh. So it's a really good trick to practice. And then look at that.
Then you would just kind of fold the sides in,
back up.
pump it up so it looks just like a chicken thigh, and you can roast it just like that. And now I'm going to take the skin off it because this is going to steam.
Because that is. All right. So we are in a space now where our veggies are nice and caramelized. So I am going to take these veggies out while Kevin still works to process the meat for the soup. I'm going to take these vegetables out. Again, the reason I'm taking them out is because I want nice, clean flavors in my soup. So I want when all of this gets mixed together, that it all tastes like these wonderful different ingredients, so that you can taste the carrots and the onion and everything, and it's not all just kind of starting to meld together. This way of cooking it this way too, it keeps the texture of the vegetables versus them turning into kind of a mush. Hey Ken, can I ask for your help for a second?
Sure, what you need?
Would you mind grabbing the pan and holding it over? Let's just do a little faster and I'll just scrape the veggies out. That'll help me to get everything out there. And keep this in mind too, everyone. Cook with a partner, because things like this aren't possible on your own if you're 5'4" and your counter comes up, to your chin. So always cook in pairs. You gotta have a spotter. Gotta have a kitchen spotter.
It's always a lot more fun to cook too.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
All right. So Kev, you have really nice long arms. Can you push this forward, flip it up and forward so that people can see what we just worked on right there?
So you've got a little bit of colorization in there, a little bit of caramelization, browning, but they're not cooked down too much. So
you can see it all. All right, so Kevin is now going to work on chopping the rest of our meat into bite-sized little bites. Like they do shrink up a little bit, but he'll show you. In the meantime, while he's chopping, if you want to move your glass bowl, you'll be able to have it in front so you can see. So in the meantime, this wonderful chicken skin that we took, right? What are we doing with this? Instead of adding the bacon grease, I'm actually going to put all of this chicken skin into this pan. This is flavor. This is like absolute wonderful flavor. And so I'm cooking. I have my pan on to a little past medium high, and it's all sizzling. And so because we're going to be adding the chicken to our soup once everything's all nice and married, I want to get as much flavor as I can out of this chicken skin, but also there's a little bits and chunks of fat in there that are going to render down a little bit, and it's going to give my chicken that I'm cooking a nice flavor. And it's okay if it sticks a little bit to your pan. It will eventually come loose. I definitely recommend the stainless steel though, because we find that it's so much easier to deal with.
Yeah, and you can really make it a one-pot meal. You can do the vegetables, and then you get kind of that nice caramelization even on the bottom of the pan that gets mixed into the soup later.
Yes, those pieces are magical flavors. Like that's where it all lives.
So for the chicken, you want to use a nice sharp knife. Sharp knives are a lot safer than dull knives. And go through, and as you're cutting them into the final pieces that you're going to be eating, just feel through and make sure that you get all the bone and stuff out of there and get last little bits of trim. So I'm just cutting these into about, half-inch strips first. And then, again, there's a little piece of cartilage there. You put that in with the bones for stock later. And then once you've got it cut in one direction, you just switch and then cube it up in the other. Just with a couple strips at a time, so you're not doing too much at once.
Let me grab this little trivet up from underneath here so that you're not moving around so bad. That'll help you a little bit there.
I'm just going to put those cubes off in a bowl so we've got them all together.
So a little update on the chicken skin. What I'm smelling right now is it smells like when you're baking a whole chicken in your oven. It smells just so delicious. And all of the fat is coming out of the skin. And now I have a nice little coating. And the chicken skin is looking like this right now. So it's like semi-rendered, maybe halfway rendered. In a little bit, I'm going to actually turn the heat up a little bit more so that I can get a little more of that caramelized color on there. And the reason that you keep hearing me say this over and over and over is because that's the flavor. That's the thing that makes the difference between when you cut all of your veggies and put everything into a pot, cut up your meat, put your stock in, and put it on whatever temperature, put your pot, your lid on, and you move. This is going to taste intentional. This is going to taste so thoughtful because you're going to taste every single ingredient for the gem that it is. And so I like cooking this way because it adds that thing, where someone eats it and they go, wow, what's the difference between this and another soup that you've had? This is your difference. The great news too about leveraging things like deboning the chicken thighs is now I was able to render some fat from the skin to make it so that I can now cook that meat. We now have bones that we can roast and use that with our scraps to make a stock for the next time and freeze it in our freezer whenever we need stock, which we use in this house like
all the time. Homemade stock is great, especially with the, making the bone broth with chicken bones, especially. A lot of that cartilage breaks down into a gelatin in homemade stock, and it's a lot thicker. Tastes a lot better, but the health benefits of it are fantastic. So it's much better for you to make a homemade bone broth and cook with that.
So now my chicken skin is rendering, and it's on its way to getting some really good brown color on there. You can see it's kind of sticking to the pan a little bit, but it comes off the second I loosen it with my spatula. So this is about the area, the place that I want to be with my chicken skin. So I'm going to keep it just a little bit longer.
That's my cue to chop faster.
Well, almost. Yeah, almost. We're actually doing really well. So I think it's all going to be good. So I'm also scraping the bottom of the pan because there's these little delicious bits of the skin and the veggies and all of this wonderful stuff. And those little bits are like what I would consider that magic, that extra flavor. But in putting all of the skin in here, I have almost about a half of an inch of fat and oil in my pan. Now, we're not going to use that in our soup because that would be a whole other, we'd have to have like a lot of health artery conversations, I suppose. So we're not going to keep our soup fat because we have to remember we do want to make this the most healthiest, delicious soup ever. And so the goal that I have here is to render all of the flavor out of these. And I'd say they're about there. So I'm going to grab a bowl that I had set aside already. And I'm going to grab these with a tong. I will say, when you go to render your skin, definitely be mindful of how much it splatters. I've already been covered already in it. So I'm going to kick my heat down a little bit so that while I'm grabbing the skins out, and I just use the metal tongs, and you can see how it's dripping up a little bit. It's hard for you to see the color, so I'll move this closer. But it looks as if it had been, rotisserieing for a while. It's got a really nice color on there, and it smells like a rotisserie chicken, and that's what's so great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so,
as I say, the other benefit of using the stainless steel pots and pans is you can use steel utensils and not worry about it.
Yeah, which I would say are pretty critical. Oops, see, you can hear my little pop in there. And so I'm pulling everything out because I'm actually going to save this skin like we talked about earlier. And when I roast the bones, I'm actually going to put this skin in to roast the bones as well, because again, this is all flavor. That's just, you don't want to leave it behind.
Yep, how to make a great stock for the next soup.
Yep. Exactly. All right. And so Kevin's going to scrub up a little bit. So what you can see here is the skin is now this nice caramely color. It's kind of crispy. It's a little crunchy. And this is still very good that I'm going to add this skin to the bones when I'm roasting. So in this one meal, we have all of our veggie scrap. We have our bones from all of the chicken thighs. We have the skin from the chicken thighs rendered down and already caramelized. If I were to roast these all into the oven and then until they're all nice and brown and pop it into my pressure cooker with, a good couple of maybe 8 cups or so of water, at the end of it, it would look like this. And so this veggie stock I made from all of my veggie scraps that we use throughout all of our cooking. And I had mushroom in here, so that's why I have a nice brown color, which I think is still pretty great. So I am going to pull out some of my liquid. I would guess almost a half a cup at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull some of this liquid out because we just don't need that much. Just going to pop it into a container here. I don't think we've ever saved our
not chicken grease,
so I don't really know what you might do with it, but
save duck, beef, pork.
We do render. You'll notice the bacon grease that I was using earlier came out of a mason jar, and the reason it came out of a mason jar is we saved all of our grease. So we usually render duck down, and we use some duck grease.
That's great with potatoes.
Yes, it is so great with potatoes. Oh my gosh. That could be a whole other thing on its own lesson someday, right? All right. So I took out quite a bit of grease, and keep in mind, this is very hot, beautiful color. I may add some in when I start to brown up my meat. So at this stage, we are going to put all of our meat in. Kev, you want to flip that sucker right on in there?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good call. This is what the inside of the pan looks like. It might look a little bit like a nightmare to you. You might be going, oh my God, I'm never going to get that thing clean again. But I promise you, when we get everything caramelized again and we get this meat cooking, it's going to absolutely release. And it's a really beautiful thing.
It's going to be a good and chickeny soup.
Yes.
It's going to be hearty.
So I can already tell that I need just a little bit more of my chicken fat. So I'm going to put the whole vessel in and just pour just a little bit of it out because I don't want it to be a greasy thing. So now I'm just kind of scraping and I'm browning the meat up a little bit, and I'm just making sure that everybody is nice and coated with a little bit of that grease so that it doesn't, so it doesn't get kind of like clumpy and stick together. At this point is where some of the extra magic is going to start. So I'm going to use my salt, and I'm going to take an extremely healthy pinch, and I'm going to do that probably 3 times. And I know a pinch isn't an actual measurement, but I think you get it.
Yeah.
And so from here, I'm going to add in some of those aromatic herbs. And so I have all of these herbs. If you've seen some of our classes before, you know that these are the herbs that I dry from our garden and preserve them in these big mason jars, and then I use them while I'm cooking all throughout the year. So we've used our own herbs. We're using our own chicken stock. You're using all of these ingredients that you have just saved and respected, and now you're practically on your way to being a complete preservation,
with delicious food.
Yeah, champion.
And it makes all the food better.
Yeah. So I'm going to use my thyme here, and I'm going to put probably about 2 tablespoons. It is dried thyme. So you just kind of want to keep that in mind. If you were using a powder, you wouldn't use 2 tablespoons of the powder. A trick that I like to add into my chicken soup is I like to add dried sage leaves. And so they are big leaves like this, dried. And I'm going to grab probably about 6 of them. And they're all whole still. So I'm going to use these guys. I'm going to crunch them in my hands. And then I'm just going to chuck it right in there. And these will add some really nice, I love that. It smells so good. So I'm going to give the meat a little swizzle because at this point it's starting to get a little brown, and almost everything. And I'll show you this because you can see the things in the bottom have started to release. So the stuff that looked like it was stuck on there is actually starting to pull up right now as I'm kind of cooking all these little things together. So we've got our thyme in there, and now we have our sage in there. I like to add a little bit of rosemary. I would normally add a fresh sprig of rosemary in, and I would put it in a little cloth or a little a tea diffuser because I don't want the leaves of the rosemary to be in my soup. They're crunchy, and most people don't enjoy chewing on rosemary, but they really love the flavor of it. So what I do is I dry my rosemary, and then I run it through my blender, and I make a powder. So in this case, this is going to be a little concentrated. So I'm only going to use like a 1/4 teaspoon of it, and then I'm going to see if I need more of it later when I taste everything together. And so all I'm going for is trying to get these wonderful, delicious herbs and that salt into the meat, coating it, keeping it all really nice and beautiful. I'm going to add a little bit of ground pepper. And this is an old coffee grinder. This is one of the cool things we learned in one of our cooking shows. And we fill it with peppercorns instead of coffee. I'm going to add 2 nice heaping pinches. How's that? That's a good unit of measurement.
It's a good unit. It's easy to taste.
And I'm going to just move this over here to get it a little out of the way. I'm also going to add in 2 cloves of garlic at this stage. And I already pre-crushed it. This is garlic that we grew in our garden last year. And we're still, or last season, I should say. And we still have really delicious cloves to work with. And so the meat right now is about, about halfway cooked. You can see that there's still some pink pieces and still some areas that need to get cooking. I have about maybe 1/4 of an inch of liquid that's come out of the meat. And so everything looks just the way it's supposed to. And so I'm just going to leave that there for a couple of seconds so that we can continue to cook it all the way through. You'll see I still have two herbs left over. I like to garnish with a little bit of splash of green at the end. So I've got my chives and some parsley. I think parsley just is a really great companion to a chicken noodle soup. You're probably wondering, I bet you are wondering, where the heck are the noodles or where the heck are potatoes, whatever you would put into it. I would tell you, we are not making, we're not going to put noodles or potatoes into ours today because we are making a really hearty, delicious soup.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice chicken and vegetable. You know, the portions of things are a little more than I would do if I was making a noodle soup. But if you were to add noodles, I'll show you at the point that you would add your noodles in if you wanted to add a little noodles or wild grain rice. In this case, we're just doing a nice chunky, hearty chicken soup because it's what everybody needs every single time. So one of the cool things about making your own stock, and I would encourage you, if you do make your own stock, take a little taste of this and a little taste of that box stock or however you use your stock and do a taste test. You'll immediately understand why you went through all of that effort because sometimes it feels like it's long, you know? And we do all of our veggie scraps. So if we had mushrooms or zucchini scraps, whatever we have, we use all of those veggies.
What you would avoid is you wouldn't put like a cauliflower scrap in there, and you wouldn't put potato scraps in there. They're too starchy.
Or broccoli or asparagus. But.
Yeah, so most vegetables, but avoid starchy things like potatoes and overpowering flavors like cauliflower or asparagus.
You could go over how we store it. Like that's not enough. Scraps. So
yep. So this we would just all these bones would just go kind of in a Ziploc bag in the freezer. Same with the vegetables in their own bag. And with the onion, we'd take this paper off and we'll throw that away because that would just burn when you were trying to get a nice brown on everything in the oven.
Yeah.
And we just use a big nonstick cookie sheet. And you want to make sure it's good nonstick because you want all that stuff to kind of burn to the pan. So you wouldn't want to put it on like nonstick tin foil and throw that away. You want to keep, again, all that nice flavor for the stock.
That's true. That's a good tip.
Even after we roast it in that cookie sheet, to get things that are a little stuck on there, we could add a little water to it when it's still hot and kind of stir that around and get those bits off the bottom of the pan. And that's really how you get that good, deep, dark color in your stock and a lot of that really good flavor, which makes it, kind of different than what a lot of people are used to, of just throwing like an old roasted chicken carcass into a pot with some vegetables and just boiling that for a couple hours to make your stock.
And that's a totally legitimate way too.
And that tastes fine. That's good. You'll get all the nutrients from the vegetables and health benefits of the chicken, but you won't get that deep flavor out of it if you don't roast everything first.
I'm going to do a quick check-in with you guys so you can see where I'm at. So the chicken is about 90% cooked. And so at this point, I am going to add in my chicken stock. And the chicken stock is, this is at room temperature because I took it out of the fridge prior. So I'm going to add in all of my chicken stock and I'm going to pop the heat up again because the whole goal is to get this nice and hot. So I'm going to give everybody a little stir. And so I'm adding in my chicken stock to get everybody incorporated, to cook the meat the rest of the way. And once that is at a stage that I feel like that the meat has been cooked through, we will then add in the rest of our veggies and then ultimately the peas. And then, you just snap, you just eat it. It's so good.
It's going to taste like a soup you've been working on all day, but it's done in an hour.
Yes, that's the really great part. Doing things like this from scratch are so super rewarding because when you do serve them to your friends, it's so noticeable that it's a different flavor than what they're used to. It's because you can't buy these types of ingredients. You can buy chicken stock, but is the chicken stock that you buy, so filled with cartilage, filled with these flavors, that the caramelization that you spent to roast it in your oven, there's a 100% difference in flavor between using ingredients that you didn't create yourself. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you didn't want to do any of the homemade stock, you would just have either boneless, skinless thighs and chuck them up like he did. And then you would literally add stock to it and just cut the whole middleman out of it if you didn't want to make your own stock. But we happen to be pretty big preservationists, and we really do like to learn how to use and respect every single bit of our ingredients that we have. And so I wanted to show you a couple of tips, things that will elevate it to make it so that it's a lot tastier than just what you would normally expect from a chicken soup.
And working with the whole chicken is great because you get so many great ingredients out of it. A lot of things with it. It's a lot less expensive to buy chicken that way.
Yeah.
So we can buy a chicken and we can just, we can either cut the quarters off it, the wings, and have a delicious meal with that. Obviously, you've got, all sorts of stuff you can do with chicken breast. Endless ways to cook that. Cook the whole chicken. Just so many ways you could debone the whole chicken and actually stuff it. There's a show for you.
Oh my gosh!
It's called chicken galantine. So that's a great way to use a whole chicken, but then you've still got all those bones to make the stock with.
Even if you do cook your chicken or roast your chicken, you can still save those bones. You can save the roasted bones. You can save raw bones. Put them in a baggie and freeze them until you feel like you have enough. So if you've made a baked chicken and you've cut it off of the bones, that carcass can be saved to be used as well.
Yes, that's great. Oh, even when you smoke chicken sometimes, and then you have kind of the smoked ingredients to make like a smoked chicken stock. That's fantastic.
All right, so I can see already that my stock is up to temperature because it's just about wanting to start to boil. I can also see that most of my meat has lost its little bits of pink, and the liquids that are coming out of those little pieces are clear. So I'm going to just move these over. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in my vegetables because they are still warm, but they're not as warm as you would want when you serve them. So I'm going to add in all the vegetables back into the soup.
Want that soup?
I want this soup. We're just reheating these now, and we're the way that we've kept it right now, everybody's kind of got their flavors are preserved. But what you don't see is that your soup, it's probably a little too difficult to show you in this way, but that's why I'm going to put it into a glass bowl to show you a little closer. So what I'm seeing is a really delicious caramel colored stock with vibrant herbs, vibrant carrots, and these wonderful bits of nice chicken pieces.
It's lots of nice color. It's not a monotone soup where it's, kind of just brown chicken, brown broth, noodles. It's got a lot of color.
If you put everything in the pan, it wouldn't have that.
Yep.
If you had done it all at the same time, popped the lid on and just cooked it, it might not have retained all of the color. So that's a good thing to mention. You'll see I still have my friendly little peas out over here. And that's just because I don't want to overcook the peas. They need only about maybe 5 minutes or so. So I'm just giving it a couple of seconds to let the other veggies warm up. And again, at no point am I bringing it up to a full boil. I'm just bringing it to barely a bubble popping up here and there. On my induction stove, it's about, I've been staying pretty much evenly on a medium heat, maybe 1 or 2 bars above or below medium. But I'm not going for a raging boil because I don't want to break everything. Because we caramelized, I don't want to turn everything into a mash or turn it all into that flavor of everything tastes the same.
Yeah,
and boiling will do that.
We'll save a lot of texture by caramelizing the vegetables and then adding them in at the end rather than boiling them the whole time to soften them up. You get the textural differences, which makes for a better soup. In my opinion.
So at this point, because I know my chicken is safely cooked, I'm going to try it to see if I need to add any more of the herbs that we had just put in. So it's very hot. That I can assure you. That's wonderful. So to me, it means a handful, a couple more pinches of salt. A handful, could you imagine? Holy smokes. The thyme is coming out really brilliantly. It's really nice and sort of subdued. So I don't think I'm going to add any more any more of my herbs. I am going to pop my peas in. I am an aggressive pea adder. Like, I love peas. So I'm going to add like this whole bunch into it. Any one ingredient that you either like more of or less of, whatever it is, put it in however you want it, cook it to your taste. Because I'm not doing a noodle in this and I'm just doing fresh vegetables, I wanted it to be really veggie heavy and really meat heavy. So it would just taste really, really great. So at this stage, depending on what it is that you wanted to add in there, if you wanted to add in dried noodles, you would be adding them in at this stage, dried noodles right on into there, and you'd just be watching them for the level of doneness. If you were adding rice, you probably would add it a little bit earlier in the stage and be mindful that you know, a cup of rice will blow up into a big amount. So I would not be err on the side of less is more in that case.
Especially with wild rice. I have made many a mistake adding wild rice to soup. It can take out a lot of moisture.
It turns into pudding.
And even when it's done, it looks great. But you put it in the fridge, the next day you come back and it's just a bowl of rice. Delicious.
Good,
Don't get me wrong.
But you can slice it and serve it like meatloaf.
Yeah, rice can be a little interesting to work into soup.
If you were super ambitious and you wanted to make your own noodles and you had fresh noodles, I would wait till your peas are just about done. They usually only take about 3 minutes, sometimes 2. Like these I can see are cooking up really nice and everything's steaming. So I would add your fresh noodles right about now. But normally I would say you would be cutting up your bread, getting everything ready to serve. So I'm going to add in my chives now because I have dried chives. So they need to soak up some of that water. You don't want to use them just as they are when they're dry because they taste dry and it is a weird texture and it hits your tongue in an odd spot. So if you have dry chives, add them in. And I'm going to add two nice little chunks of them in there. Again, I just like the way that it flavors it with some onion flavor. If you have fresh chives, you can just go ahead and chop them up and wait to add them in until a little bit later. If this was summertime, I would be using a really beautiful scallion in place of my dried herbs. But because it's not seasonal, I don't have access to the scallions.
Yeah, the fresh chives and scallions, even after you put it in the bowl, just throwing a couple on top of the end looks great. Just
so good. So good.
So
our parsley is also dried and these things are in like a nice full leaf. Hard for you to say, but it's nice full leaves. So when I pop them in, I'm just going to give them a tiny little crunch. So I'm just going to grab a nice little handful. I like the flavor that it adds. And I'm just going to crunch and drop it in. So there's going to be big pieces, small pieces, little pieces. But what it does is it adds just a really great green. Now, some people might be a little intimidated by how green the soup is, like, because there's so many wonderful ingredients in here. But I assure you, it is just supremely healthy and delicious and will taste as if it is an indulgent, velvety soup. So I'm going to give this just a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to ladle some into this bowl and hopefully be able to show you. I'll come a little bit closer to show you what we're looking for. And so all I'm doing now is just checking to see that my dried garnishes that I put in there with the chive and the parsley, I'm looking to see that they have rehydrated so that they won't be weird crunchy textures. And so everything you can see in here, everything is just really velvety because it's got the, a little bit of the chicken fat still in there. The chicken thigh dark meat is just really beautiful and it's retained its nice little chunks and shapes. It's a pretty soup. You'll see. All right, I can see that all of my herbs are actually rehydrated. So now I'm going to scoop a little into here. And it's a really hearty soup. You could absolutely thicken this if you felt like it. I typically don't thicken my chicken soup because I always have like a nice, delicious bread with it. And so I typically don't, but I'm going to come nice and close and show you this. Gonna do a little soup fly-in. See? Delicious. You can see all the ingredients are kind of preserved. You can see the wonderful golden colors. You know, I'll waft it towards the camera so you can pretend that you're able to smell it. I wish you could. It smells so good. But you can see lots of golden tones. It's a very, very, very fresh looking soup.
And I'm sneaking over for a little taste. I can't be that close to it for this long and trust it.
Yeah. And so if you could make this soup a day in advance, it reheats amazing. You could just, all I do when I reheat it the next day, because it will be a little thicker because of the fact that we used our own stocks to do it. We'll switch spots so you don't hit your head. It'll be a little bit thicker the next day. So I typically will put it in a slow cooker, and I'll put it on the absolute lowest setting, or warm even. And I will let it just kind of come up to temp and get warm that way. And I'll stir it I'll serve it right out of the crock pot family style. Otherwise, you can totally reheat it back in your Dutch oven and just watch it so that it doesn't overboil and, kind of degrade your veggies a little bit. But I think with that, we have literally just made a record timing. Sorry if some of it was rushed, but we had a lot to show you and a lot to talk about. So I think with that, we have made a really healthy, delicious chicken soup that can be customized to your taste buds. We learned how to make a nice little chicken stock, and we've learned why we're caramelizing our vegetables and how we're retaining all of those individual flavors when we combine them all together at the end. So I really encourage you to try some of these tricks and techniques. You'll never go back to regular chicken stock if you don't have to. So save those scraps, pop them in the freezer. When you have enough, roast up some stock.
And always when you make soup, it ends up being a bigger batch than you're going to eat that day. So rather than eating it 5 days in a row and get sick of the chicken soup you made that's delicious, what we do is, we'll have it, and whatever is left over, so we're not just eating it because we have it. We vacuum pack 2 cups at a time into little sealed pouches, throw those in the freezer, and then it's a real quick, easy way to have soup. You just boil it right in the vacuum packed bag and pour yourself a hot bowl of soup.
Yeah, and they're really great if you like to take soup for lunch. If you take a vacuum packed bag of soup, you can actually even microwave that on low. It sounds crazy, but those bags are meant to withstand a really good amount of heat. And so boil in the bag soups are really super healthy and really convenient. If you do add your noodles to your soup, be mindful when you do go to boil it in the bag, you might lose a little bit of the texture of your noodles, but you could always just add those in after if you wanted to.